The stars were quiet. Inside his small explorer ship, Tomal sat alone, watching the soft glow of distant planets. He had left Earth many weeks ago. His mission was simple. He was sent to explore and map planets for future travel. But something went wrong. A strong pull dragged his ship toward a green world. He tried to escape, but the engines failed. The ship shook, alarms rang, and fire sparked near the front panel. Tomal grabbed the controls, but it was too late. The ship crashed, trees broke under the force. Smoke filled the air. Tomal's head hit the side of the seat, his vision blurred. The last thing he saw before blacking out was the thick green forest. Outside the window, hours passed. Tomal opened his eyes slowly. He was not inside the ship anymore. He was lying on soft moss in a dark cave. His body ached. He tried to sit up, but pain shot through his side. Then he heard a soft sound like footsteps. He turned his head. A figure stood at the edge of the cave. It was a woman, but she was not human. Her skin was pale blue. Her long dark hair was tied back with vines. Her eyes were large and gentle, glowing slightly in the dark. She had no shoes, only wrappings around her feet. She looked at him with quiet curiosity. Tomal tried to speak. "Who are you?" he asked. The woman tilted her head. She did not answer. He tried again. "My name is Tomal. I'm not here to hurt you." She stepped back. Still no words. She only looked at him. Then she turned and walked deeper into the cave. For a moment, Tomal thought she had left, but then she returned carrying a bowl made from wood. It was filled with water. She held it out to him. Tomal took it with shaky hands. He drank slowly. The water was cold and clean. He nodded. "Thank you." She still said nothing, but there was something kind in her eyes. Over the next few days, Tomal slowly healed. The woman brought him fruit and roots. She helped clean his wounds using strange leaves that stopped the pain. He watched her carefully. She moved with grace, never making a sound. He tried to talk to her every day. "Do you live here? Can you understand me? Where am I?" She never answered with words. Sometimes she looked confused. Sometimes she smiled faintly. She spoke in small sounds, soft and musical, but he could not understand. He tried pointing to himself. "Tomal," he said. Then he pointed to her. She looked at him, touched her chest, and said, "Nara." He repeated it, "Nara." She nodded. It was a start. Tomal's ship was far away. He had seen the smoke in the sky one morning. It was not safe to walk that far with his injuries. So he stayed in the cave with Nara. They built a small fire using stones and dry leaves. At night, the cave stayed warm. Tomal watched Nara closely. She drew shapes on the ground sometimes, strange curves and circles. Maybe it was her way of writing. He tried to draw too. He made a simple map showing Earth, the stars, and his ship. Nara looked at it but did not seem to understand. She drew a different kind of star, and lines that curved like waves. It became a daily thing. Drawing in the dirt, watching each other, trying to guess meanings. One morning, Tomal woke to the sound of soft singing. Nara was sitting near the cave wall. Her eyes were closed. Her voice was low and peaceful. The song had no words he knew, but it was beautiful. It made the air feel calm. Tomal listened without speaking. When she finished, she looked at him and smiled. He pointed to his mouth and tried to hum like she did. She laughed softly. It was the first time he had heard her laugh. She sat next to him and hummed a new tune. He tried to follow. It was difficult. The sounds were strange. The notes very light, but Nara was patient. She showed him how to shape the sound with his throat. It was not just music. It was a kind of feeling. They spent the afternoon sharing sounds. Not words, but tones. Long and short, soft and sharp. It was a new kind of talking. Tomal realized something. Nara did not speak his language. He could not speak hers. But maybe they didn't need to. The forest outside was full of life. Birds with glass wings flew between the trees. The wind carried sweet smells. Strange animals moved through the grass with silent steps, and in the middle of it all, a human and an alien sat in a cave, learning to speak without words. That night, Tomal looked up at the stars. He missed Earth. He missed people. But he did not feel alone. Nara sat beside him. She handed him a smooth stone. A small flower was painted on it in white clay. Tomo looked at her. He didn't understand the meaning, but he felt it. Maybe that was enough. In a world where words failed, something else was growing, something that did not need to be spoken. Tomo sat on a rock outside the cave. The sun was soft and golden. Trees stood tall around him, their leaves shining like glass. The air smelled fresh. It had been many days since the crash. His body was healing. The pain in his side was lighter. Now, he could walk slowly without help. Nara was nearby, picking fruit from a tall tree. Her movements were quiet and careful. She carried a small basket made of vines. She walked barefoot over sharp rocks, but never seemed to get hurt. Tomo watched her. He felt thankful, but also curious. He wanted to know who she really was. He wanted to know where her people were. But he could not ask her in words. She would not understand. So he tried something new. When she came back with the basket, Tomo picked up a stick and drew in the dirt again. He made a simple shape, a round planet, then a tiny starship. He drew a dotted line showing the ship falling down. He made an arrow to a cave and drew 2 small stick figures. One for him, one for her. Nara sat beside him. She looked at the drawing, then at him. She raised an eyebrow. Tomo pointed to the first part. Earth, he said. He pointed to the ship. My ship, it broke. Then he pointed to the cave. Now I am here, with you. Nara nodded slowly. She seemed to understand some of it. Then she took the stick from him. She drew a different planet. It had 3 rings around it. Then she drew shapes that looked like trees and long buildings. She pointed to herself. Tomo understood. That was her home, not this forest. She had come from somewhere else. He pointed to her drawing. Nara's home? She looked at him and said something soft in her language. The words flowed like water. Then she tapped the ring planet again and nodded. Even without full understanding, something passed between them. Later that day, Nara brought smooth stones to the cave. She arranged them in a circle. Then she took a thin branch and placed it in the center. She began to hum. Tomo watched closely. Her humming changed tones slowly. It was not random. It felt like a pattern, maybe even a message. He listened carefully. After a while, he hummed too, trying to follow her rhythm. Nara smiled. She hummed again, this time longer. Tomo repeated it. He was not good at it, but he tried. Nara gently tapped the branch each time he got close to the right tone. She was teaching him. Not a language of words, but a language of sound and feeling. They did this every day. Sometimes they used their hands to show things. A wave of the hand meant look or stop. A tap on the chest meant me. Tomo made up signs too. He would open his fingers like a flower to show thank you. He would tap the ground twice to say here. Nara learned his signs quickly. She laughed when he made new ones. Together they built a simple way to talk. It was slow, but it worked. One evening, Tomo tried to repair a small device from his ship. It was a broken radio. He cleaned the wires, adjusted the screen, and tapped the buttons. The screen blinked once, then died. He sighed. Still not working. Nara came closer. She touched the radio gently. Then she pointed to the sky. Tomo shook his head. I know. No signal. He pointed to himself, then made a sad face. Nara watched him for a moment. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm. Her touch was warm. Then she hummed again. This time, the sound was soft, like a lullaby. Tomo closed his eyes. The sound filled the cave. He didn't understand the meaning, but it made him feel calm. He lay back against the wall. Nara sat beside him, still humming. And for the first time since the crash, Tomo did not feel lost. The next morning, Nara brought a new item. A long flat stone with lines carved into it. It looked old. She placed it in front of him and pointed to the lines. Tomo looked closer. The lines were not just decoration. They were symbols, repeating in a pattern. Was it writing? He pointed to one line. What does this mean? Nara said something, but he did not understand. Still, she spoke the word again slowly. Then she sang the same sound. Tomo copied her. They went through each symbol that way. He repeated the sounds. Sometimes he got it wrong and she corrected him. He began to feel like a child learning to speak again. But Nora was kind and patient. They sat under the open sky each day. Trees swayed above them. Birds sang in the distance. Their lessons continued, not with books, but with songs, signs, and shared silence. One day, Tomo looked at Nora and said her name in her own way. He shaped the sound just like she did. She looked surprised. Then she smiled brightly. It was the first time he had said something real in her language. He felt proud. That night, they sat by the fire outside the cave. Stars filled the sky. Nora pointed at one group of stars and hummed a tune. Then she drew a shape in the air. Tamel copied her. He sang the tune softly. She nodded. He was learning. Not just words, not just signs. He was learning her way of dreaming. The sun rose slowly over the green hills. A soft wind moved through the forest. Leaves whispered above as if the trees were speaking to each other. Tomo stood outside the cave, watching the light spread across the sky. Nora walked beside him, carrying a small pouch made of dried leaves and vines. She looked at him and pointed toward a path covered in moss and glowing flowers. Tomo nodded. He followed her as they walked deeper into the forest. They walked in silence. Birds flew overhead. Strange animals peeked from behind thick trees. The deeper they went, the brighter the leaves became. Some trees had wide trunks with patterns glowing in blue and white. The air felt different here, softer, quieter. Nora stopped at the edge of a clearing. In the middle stood a group of tall trees. Their bark shimmered. Their branches reached high above. A faint hum came from the trunks, like music floating through the ground. Nora placed her hand on one of the trees. She closed her eyes. Her face became calm. Tomo stood beside her, unsure what to do. He touched the tree too. The surface felt warm. As he closed his eyes, something strange happened. He saw light, not real light, but light inside his mind. Then he saw images. A small girl running through the forest, her hair blowing in the wind. She was laughing, soldiers chasing her, fire in the sky, a ship burning in the clouds. The girl hiding in a cave. Then he saw Nora, older now, standing under the same trees. She was alone, watching the stars. Tomo opened his eyes quickly. His heart beat fast. He looked at Nora. She was still touching the tree, eyes closed. A tear moved down her cheek. He understood now. These trees held memories. They shared them, not with sound or speech, but through feeling and vision. Tomo stepped back. The humming of the trees still echoed in his mind. Nora opened her eyes. She looked at him. She knew what he had seen. She gave a small nod. Tomo whispered, "Thank you." She did not speak, but her eyes were kind. They sat near the roots of the tree. Tomo looked up. The sky above the trees looked wider here. The colors were richer. He touched the bark again. A new set of images came. This time, he saw stars, planets spinning, a large ship moving across space, humans walking inside. He saw himself, younger, working on machines, laughing with his sister, looking at old photos of Earth. The vision faded. Nora had seen it too. She looked at him with surprise. Tomo placed his hand on his chest. "That was my memory." She touched the tree again and then pointed to him. She had seen what he saw. Tomo finally understood what made this forest special. It was not just a place. It was a bridge, a way to share dreams. They returned to the cave that evening, walking slowly. The forest had changed for Tomo. Now it was not just beautiful. It was alive in a new way. That night, they sat by the fire. Tomo picked up a flat stone and began to draw. He drew the tall trees and small dots around them. He showed Nora the drawing. She smiled and added her own marks. She drew circles near the trees and small figures. Together, they built a picture of the forest, one from memory, one from the heart. In the days that followed, they visited the memory trees often. Tomo learned to feel instead of ask. He learned to listen with his heart. He did not just see Nera's past. He began to understand her world. Her people had once traveled across stars, but they lost their home in a great war. Many of them were gone. Only a few stayed on this planet. Nara was one of them. Tomo felt sadness in the visions, but also hope. One day, Nara showed him a special tree. It stood alone on a hill. Its trunk was darker, but its hum was stronger. She pressed her hand against it and invited him to do the same. Tomo placed his palm on the bark. This time, the dream was deeper. He saw Nara again, sitting by a fire. She was watching the sky, waiting, hoping. Then she turned her head. She saw someone falling from the sky. It was him. Tomo stepped back. She had dreamed of him before they met. He looked at her. She nodded. She had seen him in the trees, long before. The crash. She did not speak his language, but she had already known his soul. Tomo sat down on the hill. The sky above was wide and quiet. He looked at Nara and said her name gently. She sat beside him. They said nothing more. The trees spoke for them. That night, Tomo dreamed not of Earth, but of her world. He saw the forest as a child might see it, full of wonder and light. He saw the stars above her home. He no longer felt like a visitor. He was learning her way of dreaming. And for the first time, he felt he belonged. Morning light passed through the trees. The forest was calm. Birds flew between branches, and the wind moved through the leaves. Tomo and Nara sat outside the cave, eating fruit and soft bread made from ground roots. They had learned how to live. Together, Tomo's body had healed. His walk was strong now. His cuts had faded. He no longer felt like a stranger in this place. He woke each day with peace in his heart. Nara pointed to the hill across the river. A tall structure stood there, broken and half covered in green vines. It looked like an old tower made of stone and crystal. Nara made signs with her hands, showing that it once turned with the wind. Tomo nodded. He understood. It was a wind tower, maybe a source of power or light. Nara touched her chest and then pointed to the tower. She wanted to fix it. Tomo stood up and smiled. He pointed to himself and then to her. Together, they walked through the forest and crossed the river on a fallen tree. The water below was clear. Small fish swam under the surface. The tower stood tall, even in its broken state. Its base was strong, but the upper part was missing pieces. A part of the spinning fan was lying nearby, half buried in dirt. Tomo touched the stone. It was smooth and cool. Nara pointed to a large crystal on the side. It glowed faintly, but the light was weak. Tomo looked at the wires, the wheels, and the cracked edges. He understood machines. On Earth, he worked with tools, built small engines, and repaired broken systems. This tower was different, but he could guess how it worked. They started the work. Tomo lifted broken parts and cleaned them. Nara climbed the side and tied vines for support. They worked without words, using hand signs and looks. Sometimes they laughed when something fell. Sometimes they paused to rest. Tomo admired the way Nara worked. She moved with care and balance. She understood the tower's history. She treated it like something alive. Each day they returned. Together, they fixed the broken fan they found. New wood and shaped it using sharp stones. Tomo created new blades, and Nara helped tie them in place. They cleaned the crystal using a special blue leaf Nara found in the forest. After cleaning, the crystal glowed brighter. When the wind came. One evening, the fan turned slowly. It made a soft hum, deep and peaceful. The light inside the tower grew stronger. Nara stepped back and smiled. Her eyes shone like the crystal. Tomo watched her. He had never seen beauty in silence before, but now he understood. They sat by the tower, watching it spin under the setting sun. The sky turned orange, and the forest grew quiet. Tomo took out a small round device from his pocket. It was a memory orb from his ship. He had kept it safe since the crash. He touched the side, and it showed a glowing image above it, a picture of Earth, blue oceans, white clouds, cities with lights. Nara leaned closer. She looked at the image. With wide eyes, Tomo pointed to it. My home. She reached out slowly and touched the light. It faded into a new image, a family photo. Tomo, his sister, and their dog, standing in front of their house. Nara smiled. She touched the device again. A new image showed his ship flying through space. Then she placed her hand on the crystal beside her. The crystal pulsed, and a new image appeared in the air, not from the orb, but from the crystal itself. It showed Nara as a child, holding hands with two tall figures, her parents. They stood in front of the same tower years ago. Before it broke, Tomo looked at her. She was showing him her memory now. She trusted him. That night, they returned to the memory trees. They placed their hands on the bark together. This time, the visions came slowly, not sharp, but soft, blended. Tomo saw a memory where he and Nara were walking in the forest, even though it had not happened yet. He saw her teaching a small child. He saw them building something together. He opened his eyes. She opened hers at the same time. They had seen the same dream. It was not from the past. It was from the future. Nara touched her heart and then reached toward him. Tomo placed his hand over hers. There were no words, no sound, but something strong had grown between them. Not built by speech, not explained by science. It was a silent bond, a deep connection that needed no name. In the days that followed, they returned to the tower. To keep it working, they added flowers at the base and cleaned the path leading to it. The tower now stood bright and alive, like a light between two worlds. Tomo dreamed less of Earth. He began to dream of the forest, the trees, the tower, and Nara. He no longer needed to ask questions. He knew her heart, and she knew his. The wind tower turned slowly under the blue sky. The soft hum from its crystal filled the air. Tomo and Nara sat beside it, their backs resting against the cool stone. It was a peaceful morning. Birds sang nearby, and sunlight passed through the leaves above. Tomo held a small stick and drew a star in the dirt. He added a shape for a ship and drew a figure beside it. Nara watched him with a gentle smile. She picked up a leaf and pressed it onto the drawing, leaving a faint mark. It became a part of the picture. Tomo looked at her. "Dream?" he asked. Softly. Nara nodded. She did not speak in words, but her answer was clear. Later that day, the sky changed. A soft hum filled the air, but it did not come from the tower. It came from above. Tomo looked up and froze. A ship was moving through the clouds. It was not like Nara's ship or anything from her world. It was human. It had a smooth silver body and flashing lights along the sides. A rescue signal blinked underneath. Tomo stood still. His heart beat faster. He knew that ship. It was from Earth. The ship passed slowly overhead, scanning the forest. It made a wide turn and started to descend. A few minutes later, it landed near the open field. Not far from the edge of the forest, Tomo turned to Nara. She had also seen it. Her face had no fear, but there was something else in her eyes, a quiet stillness. Tomo took a few steps toward the field. The ship door opened. A group of humans stepped out. They wore explorer suits with the Earth logo on their sleeves. One of them waved. "Are you Tomo?" he called out. Tomo raised his hand slowly. "Yes." They ran toward him. A man scanned him with a small device. "You're alive," the man said with relief. "We found your crash signal last week. Your ship's remains were still burning when we arrived in orbit." Tomo nodded. "I was saved." The man looked around. "By who?" Tomo turned. Nara stood near the trees. She didn't come closer. She stood still like a shadow among the leaves. Tomo pointed. "Her name is Nara." The humans turned to look. Some of them froze. One of them stepped forward and lifted a scanner. But Tomo shook his head. "She's not dangerous," he said. "She saved me." They looked at each other, unsure. One woman lowered her scanner. The leader spoke again. "We should bring you back. The base ship is close. We can take you home." Tomo looked at the open ramp of the ship. He thought of Earth, of warm showers, metal floors, food from machines, voices speaking his language. Then he looked back at Nara. She had not moved. She was not calling him to stay. She was not begging him to go. She only watched. Tomo walked slowly toward the ship. He stopped near the door. He placed one foot on the ramp, then turned back again. The leader said, "Are you coming?" Tomo was quiet. "I don't know." Inside the ship, the walls were clean and smooth. Lights blinked. The seats were soft. He sat down and looked through the window. Outside, The forest seemed far away. The ship made a soft sound as it prepared. For lift out, the leader sat beside him. You've been through a lot. It's normal to feel confused. We'll help you rest and recover. Tomel nodded. He held the small memory orb in his hand. He pressed it. Images of Earth appeared. Cities, roads, ships and space dot, but his mind didn't stay on them. He closed his eyes and saw the memory trees. He saw the glowing forest, the songs Nara sang, her hand on the crystal, the silent dreams they shared. He opened his eyes, stopped the launch. The leader looked at him. What? I'm not going back. Not yet. The leader frowned. We can't leave you here. It's unsafe. Tomel stood up. It's not unsafe. It's home. He ran to the door. The others called after him. But he didn't stop. He jumped out and landed on the grass. The forest was waiting. And so was she. He ran across the field. Nara was still there. When he reached her, he stopped and breathed deeply. I came back, he said. She didn't answer with words. She simply reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. Tomel looked up. The rescue ship had not lifted. It stood still, waiting. He looked at Nara. Do you want me to go? She shook her head slowly. Tomel understood. She would not ask him to stay, and she would not ask him to leave. It had to be his choice. He looked one more time at the ship. Then he turned away from it. He made his choice. Together, they walked back to the forest. The trees moved gently in the wind. The wind tower turned slowly. The hum welcomed him back. Tomel placed his hand on one of the memory trees. He closed his eyes. This time, he didn't just see the past. He saw the dream of a life not yet lived, a life among the trees, a life beside someone who didn't need words to speak to his soul. And when he opened his eyes, she was still beside him. The sky had returned, but he had chosen to stay grounded. He was no longer a visitor. He was home. The forest was quiet. Tomel and Nara sat near the memory trees, watching the light fade as the sun moved behind the hills. The wind tower's soft hum filled the air. Tomel's heart was full, but his mind was restless. The rescue ship had left. Tomel watched it fly away into the sky. The sound grew smaller and smaller until it was gone. He felt relief but also sadness. He thought about Earth, about his family, and the life he had left behind. But most of all, he thought about Nara. She had not spoken any words since the ship came, but Tomel could see in her eyes that she cared. She wanted him to be happy. Tomel closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The memories of the trees came to him again. He placed his hand on the rough bark of one tree. He felt warmth and light flowing through him. The visions returned, but this time they were clearer. He saw Nara as a child, running through the forest with laughter. He saw her family under the stars. He saw her hopes and fears. Then the vision changed. He saw himself standing beside Nara. They were building a small home near the memory trees. They were planting flowers and lighting a fire. The dream was bright and full of life. Tomel opened his eyes slowly. He looked at Nara, who sat quietly beside him. He reached out and took her hand. I choose this dream, he said softly. Nara smiled, and her eyes shone. She squeezed his hand gently. The days passed like soft waves. Tomel and Nara lived together in the forest. They learned each other's ways more and more. Tomel taught Nara about machines and tools. Nara showed Tomel how to listen to the trees and feel the songs in the wind. They built a small shelter near the memory trees. It was made of wood and vines, strong and warm. Inside, they placed stones and crystals that glowed softly at night. Tomel worked on a small radio from his ship. It was broken beyond repair, but he kept it as a reminder of where he came from. Nara gave him a gift. It was a small flower made from blue leaves and white clay. She pressed it into a flat stone and gave it to him. Tomel kept the stone close. It was a symbol of their bond, silent but strong. One evening, a soft song filled the air. Nara began to hum the melodies she had taught Tomel before. He joined her, his voice low and steady. The forest seemed to listen. The trees swayed in rhythm. The stars above blinked slowly, as if joining their song. Tomel looked at Nara. I dream in your language now. She smiled. Their dreams became their words. Their feelings became their speech. They no longer needed voices. One day, while walking through the forest, Tomo found a small sapling growing near the memory trees. It was a young tree, but its leaves shone with the same light as the great trees. He showed it to Nara. She nodded happily. Together, they planted it carefully. They watered it with clean water from the stream. Tomo realized that their lives were like the sapling, new, growing, and full of hope. He looked at the sky. The stars were bright. He felt peace. He had chosen the dream he wanted to live. With Nara. In the forest that spoke without words, they walked back to their shelter. The night was calm. Tomo held Nara's hand and whispered, "I am home." She squeezed his hand and leaned on his shoulder. And under the quiet sky, two souls who could not speak the same language had learned to dream in one. The morning sun rose softly over the forest. The light moved through the tall trees, casting long shadows on the ground. Tomo and Nara stood together near the memory trees. The air was cool and fresh. Birds sang quietly as they flew above the leaves. Tomo looked at Nara. She smiled gently, her eyes shining with warmth. No words passed between them. They did not need to speak. Tomo reached out and took her hand. They walked slowly toward the heart of the forest. The memory trees stood tall, their bark glowing softly like stars. Tomo placed his palm on one tree. He closed his eyes. The visions came again. This time, they were clearer than ever before. He saw the past, the present, and the future all mixed together. He saw Nara as a child, laughing and running through the forest. He saw her people building great cities among the stars. He saw the war that forced them to leave their home. Then, he saw himself standing beside her. They were planting trees, building homes, and singing songs that filled the forest with light. He opened his eyes and looked at Nara. She placed her hand on his heart. Then she leaned her head on his shoulder. Tomo smiled softly. They walked through the forest together. The trees whispered in the wind. The flowers bent toward them as if to greet them. They reached a small clearing where the wind tower stood, turning slowly in the breeze. The crystal inside shone like a beacon. Tomo took a deep breath. He spoke quietly, not with words, but with a feeling. He shared his dreams with her. Dreams of hope, of peace, and of a life lived side by side. Nara answered with a soft hum. It was a song without words, but full of meaning. Tomo had learned to dream in her language. He no longer needed to speak the words of earth. Because in this forest, in her world, their hearts spoke louder than any voice. The days passed gently. Tomo and Nara built a new life together. They planted trees that would grow tall and strong. They cared for the memory trees and the wind tower. The forest became their home. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Tomo and Nara sat by the fire. The stars began to appear, sparkling in the dark sky. Tomo looked at Nara and smiled. They did not need to speak, because they had found something rare and beautiful. A silent bond that connected to souls from different worlds, a love that was written, not in words, but in dreams. And as the night deepened, the forest sang softly around them. The song of two hearts learning to dream as one.